Within just 72 hours, the San Francisco Bay Area has been shaken by two magnitude 3.7 earthquakes, the latest striking near.
Over the course of just 72 hours, the San Francisco Bay Area has been struck by two significant earthquakes, leaving both experts and residents rattled and confused. From the bustling streets of San Francisco to the quieter towns of Sacramento, the pressing question remains: what is causing this unusual surge in seismic activity, and what could it mean for California's future? As concerns grow, we dive into the science behind these tremors, explore the hidden dangers beneath the surface, and examine what might be coming next for the state. In just 3 days, the Bay Area has experienced back-to-back earthquakes measuring 3.7 in magnitude, sending shockwaves through a population still haunted by memories of the devastating 1989 Loma Prieta earthquake. While initially appearing as ordinary seismic events, the timing and frequency of these quakes have sparked widespread concern. Are these tremors a precursor to something larger, or are they isolated incidents that will fade into history? With uncertainty looming, experts are closely analyzing seismic data, attempting to determine whether this uptick in activity is an anomaly or an indication of a more significant shift beneath the Earth's surface. California has long been a seismic hotspot, with the infamous San Andreas Fault running through the state like a ticking time bomb. The question many are asking is whether these recent quakes are connected or if they are random disturbances in the ground. Could these tremors be redistributing pressure along fault lines, including the San Andreas? While earthquakes are nothing new, the close succession of these events raises concerns about deeper movements within the Earth's crust that could signal a major seismic event in the near future. Given that the Bay Area is one of the world's most densely populated regions, experts are questioning whether the region is prepared for a potential massive quake. Scientists suggest that pressure along California's fault systems is steadily increasing, making this a tense waiting game. Could these tremors be early warnings of a larger event brewing beneath our feet? Earthquakes rarely occur in isolation, and even minor tremors can trigger stress releases along nearby fault lines, potentially setting off more seismic activity. With two quakes occurring so close together, many wonder whether this is the start of a seismic sequence foreshadowing a larger disaster. California's complex network of fault lines means that every tremor could contribute to releasing pressure across vast areas. The scientific community is closely monitoring the situation, knowing that the state sits on the edge of a possible catastrophe. As experts examine seismic data, tension grows, with a lingering fear that something far more significant could be on the horizon. Could these be the initial signals of the feared Big One, or will they turn out to be just another temporary geological shift? The San Andreas Fault, the Hayward Fault, and various other fault systems beneath California's surface are constantly shifting, groaning under immense pressure. Each small tremor adds stress that could eventually trigger a catastrophic rupture. Due to the unpredictability of earthquakes, it is nearly impossible to determine exactly when the next major quake will strike. However, historical patterns suggest that California is overdue for a significant event. With so many densely populated cities built near fault lines, the risk of devastation is greater than ever. Each new tremor adds to the growing concern among residents and experts alike: are these small quakes just the beginning of something larger? Could the land be shifting in ways that will reshape the Bay Area forever? Beneath the East Bay, a silent yet dangerous force stirs, the Hayward Fault. Though often overlooked, this fault line is one of the most hazardous in California. It has remained relatively quiet for decades, but the recent increase in seismic activity has raised concerns. Could these recent earthquakes be early warning signs of a major rupture that could devastate one of the state's most densely populated regions? Experts have long warned that the Hayward Fault is overdue for a large earthquake, and if it were to rupture, cities like Oakland, Hayward, and Berkeley would bear the brunt of the destruction. Are these tremors just minor disturbances, or is the region on the brink of a significant seismic disaster? While the San Andreas Fault often dominates discussions, the Hayward Fault runs directly through heavily populated urban areas, making it a hidden but critical threat. It has remained relatively inactive for over a century, yet scientists caution that it is a ticking time bomb. As pressure continues to build along the fault, each passing year increases the risk of a major earthquake. Although the recent quakes seem minor, they may be early indicators of the Hayward Fault beginning to release its built-up stress. With each tremor, the question grows more urgent: how much longer before the fault finally ruptures? Even a moderate earthquake along the Hayward Fault could have devastating consequences, particularly in cities like Oakland and Berkeley, where much of the infrastructure is not designed to withstand a powerful seismic event. While scientists cannot pinpoint when a major quake will occur, the increasing seismic activity in the region, coupled with growing strain on the fault, suggests that the risk is higher than ever. Are these tremors warning signs of an impending rupture, or are they simply temporary fluctuations in seismic activity? As pressure builds, the stakes grow higher, and the ticking clock grows louder. With millions of people living along the Hayward Fault, the importance of earthquake preparedness cannot be overstated. Though the fault has not ruptured in over 150 years, the accumulated stress could be immense. As California's population continues to grow, more lives are at risk. The threat of a major earthquake is real, and it is growing. Could this recent activity serve as a wake-up call for the Bay Area to prepare for what experts have long feared? Or will residents continue to live in a state of uncertainty, waiting for the inevitable? With each tremor, the urgency of preparation becomes clearer. Time may be running out. Beyond California's well-known fault lines, an even greater danger lurks to the north, hidden beneath the Pacific Ocean, the Cascadia subduction zone. This massive fault system, one of the most powerful on Earth, has the potential to generate earthquakes of up to 9.0 magnitude. Though it has remained dormant for over 300 years, scientists are increasingly concerned about the potential for a catastrophic rupture. Could the recent seismic activity in California be linked to mounting stress along the Cascadia subduction zone? If so, the entire Pacific Northwest could be on the verge of an unprecedented disaster. The Cascadia subduction zone operates differently from California's traditional fault lines. It lies offshore, where the Pacific and North American plates grind together in a slow but relentless collision. This fault is capable of unleashing a megathrust earthquake, triggering massive tsunamis, widespread destruction, and further seismic activity in surrounding regions. Historically, the fault has ruptured every 300 to 500 years, and with over 320 years since its last major quake, concerns are growing. Could the recent uptick in seismic activity along California's fault lines indicate mounting pressure along Cascadia, or is this merely a coincidence? As stress continues to accumulate within the Cascadia subduction zone, residents of Oregon, Washington, and British Columbia remain on edge. A megathrust earthquake from this fault would send shockwaves throughout the Pacific Northwest, causing catastrophic destruction and loss of life. The pressing question is, how prepared are these regions for such an event? Are we nearing the point where a rupture becomes inevitable? The timing could not be more critical. Will the Cascadia subduction zone remain dormant, or is it preparing for one of the most devastating earthquakes in recorded history? The answer may come sooner than we expect. The Cascadia subduction zone, one of the most powerful fault systems on Earth, poses a terrifying risk as scientists monitor increasing seismic activity. A potential rupture could send a massive earthquake and tsunami crashing toward the coast, raising concerns about how much longer the region can hold its breath before the inevitable occurs. This fault stretches from Northern California to British Columbia, and unlike typical fault lines, a megathrust earthquake here could trigger widespread destruction across entire states. Unfortunately, much of the region's infrastructure is not designed to withstand such a disaster, and if the Cascadia subduction zone were to rupture, the devastation would be felt for decades. The growing number of tremors in California raises troubling questions. Could this be the precursor to a larger seismic event? Could the fault be on the verge of awakening, and if so, how can we prepare? While Northern California's recent earthquakes have made headlines, a much larger threat lurks in Southern California, the San Andreas Fault. This fault has been accumulating tension for over 300 years, and scientists have long warned that it is overdue for a catastrophic rupture. The recent uptick in seismic activity in Northern California has led to speculation about whether this could be an early warning for an even larger earthquake brewing in the south. If the San Andreas Fault, particularly the segment stretching from Palm Springs to the Salton Sea, were to rupture, the consequences would be devastating, sending shockwaves through Southern California and beyond. Capable of producing an earthquake of magnitude 8.0 or higher, this fault has remained eerily silent for centuries, leading experts to believe that it is only a matter of time before it releases its pent-up energy. Cities like Los Angeles, Riverside, and Palm Springs would face widespread destruction, with aftershocks potentially impacting the entire western United States. As scientists closely monitor this growing seismic threat, the question remains, are these recent quakes a signal that the San Andreas Fault is about to rupture, or are we merely experiencing unsettling aftershocks? Beyond California, another seismic threat is emerging, the Walker Lane Fault Zone in Nevada. This lesser-known fault system, located just north of Las Vegas, has been exhibiting increased activity in recent months, causing concern among geologists. While the region has historically been considered seismically quiet, the growing frequency of tremors suggests that the fault is under increasing strain. If the Walker Lane Fault were to rupture, the seismic waves could impact Nevada, California, and even parts of Arizona, potentially triggering a chain reaction of earthquakes along interconnected fault lines. Scientists are now closely monitoring the region, wary of a larger event looming on the horizon. Unlike California, Nevada is relatively unprepared for a major earthquake, with many areas, particularly around Las Vegas, lacking the infrastructure to withstand such an event. As the seismic activity continues to rise, experts are urging increased awareness and preparedness before it's too late. The growing web of seismic risk extends beyond California and Nevada, with fault lines across the United States showing signs of increased activity. The tectonic plates beneath the country are constantly shifting, and stress is accumulating along a vast network of faults, including the Cascadia Subduction Zone and the Walker Lane Fault Zone. While California remains the most well-known seismic hotspot, other regions are also experiencing increased pressure, making it difficult to predict where the next major earthquake will strike. The possibility of one region's seismic activity triggering a chain reaction in another is a chilling thought, and as this interconnected web of risk continues to expand, the nation faces an uncertain future. The Cascadia Subduction Zone remains particularly concerning, as it is capable of unleashing a megathrust earthquake that could send shockwaves across the Pacific Northwest. The big question remains, how prepared are we for the next major seismic event, and what can we do to mitigate the impending disaster? The entire fault could rupture, sending a massive earthquake and tsunami crashing toward the coast. As scientists track the rising seismic activity, tension continues to mount, with each new tremor and aftershock potentially signaling an impending disaster. The Cascadia Subduction Zone is particularly frightening due to its vast reach, spanning from Northern California to British Columbia. Unlike typical fault line earthquakes, a megathrust event here could send shockwaves across multiple states, causing widespread destruction. Worse still, the region's infrastructure is not designed to withstand such a catastrophe. If the Cascadia Subduction Zone were to rupture, the devastation would last for decades. Could California's recent seismic activity be a precursor to an even greater event? Is the Cascadia Subduction Zone on the verge of awakening, and if so, how can we prepare? While recent quakes in Northern California have made headlines, the true looming threat in Southern California is the San Andreas Fault, which has been silently accumulating tension for over 300 years. Scientists have long warned that the southern segment of the San Andreas Fault is overdue for a catastrophic earthquake, one that could rival any modern disaster. Could the increased seismic activity in Northern California be an early warning of a larger quake brewing in the south? If the San Andreas Fault, stretching from Palm Springs to the Salton Sea, finally ruptures, the effects would be devastating. The sheer size and power of this fault make it one of the most dangerous in the country, with the potential to release an earthquake as powerful as magnitude 8.0. The last major rupture occurred over 300 years ago, and since then, pressure has been quietly building. With every passing year, the question looms, how much longer can it hold before unleashing its pent-up energy? The impact would be catastrophic. Cities like Los Angeles, Riverside, and Palm Springs would experience violent ground shaking, causing widespread damage to buildings, roads, and utilities. The aftershocks would ripple across the western United States, sending shockwaves of destruction throughout the nation. How prepared are residents of the San Andreas Fault Zone for such an event? With every tremor, fear grows stronger that the big one could be imminent. Could recent quakes signal the awakening of the San Andreas Fault, or are they merely unsettling aftershocks? Despite its long dormancy, the southern San Andreas Fault is far from inactive. Over the past decade, scientists have closely monitored its increasing seismic activity, raising concerns that a rupture is imminent. The implications of such an event are so vast that preparedness has become a critical topic of discussion. Could recent tremors in Northern California be the start of a chain reaction leading to a long-awaited rupture in the south? As seismic experts analyze the data, they cannot ignore the mounting pressure. Each minor tremor brings us one step closer to a major quake, leaving one critical question: when will it happen, and how can we prepare for the inevitable? While California is the primary focus of seismic concerns, there is a growing threat beyond the state's borders: the Walker Lane Fault Zone in Nevada. Located just north of Las Vegas, this fault system has exhibited increased activity, raising concerns about its potential to trigger a massive earthquake. In recent months, seismic events have been on the rise, unsettling residents accustomed to only occasional tremors. Could this increase in activity be an early warning that the Walker Lane Fault Zone is nearing its breaking point? If it ruptures, what would the impact be on Nevada, California, and surrounding regions? Historically, the Walker Lane Fault Zone has been considered relatively quiet, but recent patterns suggest that stress is building. Some geologists now believe that this region could be on the brink of a significant earthquake. While not as well known as the San Andreas or Hayward faults, its potential for destruction is just as concerning. A rupture could send shockwaves across Nevada, California, and even parts of Arizona, potentially triggering a chain reaction of seismic events along interconnected fault lines. Could these recent tremors be the first signs of a larger, more dangerous event? Scientists are closely monitoring the region for signs of further escalation. One of the most concerning aspects of the Walker Lane Fault Zone is its connection to a larger tectonic system. It is part of an expansive network of fault lines that stretch across the western United States. As pressure builds along Walker Lane, it could set off seismic activity elsewhere, including along the San Andreas Fault. Could Nevada's seismic activity be the tipping point that triggers a massive earthquake in California? If the Walker Lane Fault were to rupture, it could spark a cascade of events that affect the entire region. The interconnected nature of these faults makes it difficult to predict where the next big quake will strike, but the rising activity in Nevada is a stark reminder of the need for preparedness. Despite the increasing seismic activity, much of Nevada remains underprepared for a major earthquake. Many areas, particularly around Las Vegas, lack the infrastructure to withstand severe shaking. If the Walker Lane Fault were to rupture, millions of people could be at risk, especially in regions unaccustomed to frequent seismic activity. The question remains, how much longer will Nevada remain relatively quiet before experiencing a major event? As the frequency of tremors continues to rise, experts urge greater attention to the Walker Lane Fault Zone and the implementation of preparedness measures. Across the western United States, an interconnected web of seismic risk is growing. While California remains the epicenter of seismic activity, other regions, including the Cascadia Subduction Zone and the Walker Lane Fault Zone, are showing increased signs of strain. This raises urgent questions about whether seismic activity in one region could trigger events in another. Could pressure building in Nevada and California be connected to the eventual rupture of the Cascadia Subduction Zone? As pressure mounts along multiple fault lines, the risk of a large-scale, multi-fault earthquake increases. What does this mean for West Coast residents, and how can they prepare for an event that could change the course of history? Scientists monitoring seismic activity across the United States are increasingly concerned about the growing network of tectonic stress. The concept of a multi-fault earthquake spanning the entire western United States is no longer just a hypothetical scenario, it is a real and pressing threat. With pressure accumulating along the Walker Lane Fault Zone, the San Andreas Fault, and the Cascadia Subduction Zone, the likelihood of a massive earthquake affecting multiple regions is rising. Could a series of interconnected earthquakes wreak havoc across the nation, or will these faults release their tension in smaller, more manageable events? Only time will tell, but one thing is clear: tectonic forces are more connected than previously thought, and the risk of widespread destruction is at an all-time high. The potential destruction from the Big One could be catastrophic, leading to collapsed buildings, disrupted transportation, and widespread power outages. What was once considered a distant concern may now be just around the corner. The recent increase in seismic activity is not merely a coincidence. Scientists have identified a clear pattern of rising earthquake frequency and magnitude, particularly along the San Andreas Fault. While experts cannot pinpoint the exact moment the Big One will strike, the probability of it occurring in the near future continues to grow. Despite California's infrastructure being designed to withstand earthquakes, it may still fall short in protecting residents from the devastation of a magnitude 8.0 earthquake. The pressing question remains, are we truly prepared for the big one, or will California be caught off guard when the fault finally ruptures? This uncertainty lingers in the minds of all Californians, as recent tremors raise concerns that they could be precursors to a much larger seismic event. One undeniable fact stands: the time to prepare is now. The longer the San Andreas Fault remains dormant, the greater the force of its eventual rupture. The big one is inevitable, the only question is when it will strike and how well we will be prepared to face it. Stay informed, stay prepared, and continue to monitor seismic developments. The Earth is constantly shifting, and vigilance is key to staying ahead of potential disasters.